Hi everyone. Morning. I'm so sorry I can't be with you. I promise I haven't left for Devon yet. I am at home, but I did bring COVID back with me. So to keep you all at safe, I've decided to stay at home and film myself. So I just want to start you off with a story. There was a man who, without fail, did a driving lesson every Tuesday at 4 p.m. He met up with a friend after a lesson the once, and his friend asked him, "How are you getting on with these driving lessons?" The man said, "Yeah, great, yeah, I love it. Really great looking car smells great, great sound system, the cruise control, climate control, really economical on fuel, and they can really fly when needed. Can't wait until next week." "Ah, what's the instructor like?" his friend asked. "Steve, yeah, he's great. He's really passionate about driving, really encouraging, really knows what he's talking about. And he's been driving for such a long time, and he's such a faithful guy. He's always there at my house, 5 to 4 every Tuesday." "Wow," said his friend. "Well, what about your kids? What do you do with them? I'm sure you have them on a Tuesday, don't you?" So, well, the man said, he said this, "Well, Steve lets them join us in the back. And I really think it'll give them a head start, and I just hope that when the time comes, they will recognise the importance of taking driving lessons themselves." "Oh, that sounds great. You've been doing this for some time now. You must be nearly ready to get that licence and hit the road by yourself now." That's what his friend said. He said, "Yeah, it was 10 years ago today that someone introduced me to Steve. But no way am I ready to go on this alone yet. I've barely touched the wheel. Steve's the driver anyways. I was never any good when I got behind the wheel, so I just let him get on with it, really." He's really encouraging though, and the kids love it. Does this sound ridiculous? Putting endless time and resources into something and not achieving the purpose for the lessons. Or maybe he just done something for so long he's forgotten why he's doing it at all, or possibly the reason why he is doing it is a passive, enjoyable habit. But isn't the point of driving lessons that you learn how to drive? Do you think the man will ever improve his driving if he carries on this way? Or another question, if all his kids ever see their dad's experience and passivity when it comes to the driving, do you think they'll understand what driving lessons are for and be encouraged to eventually drive a car? I mean, they might be encouraged to sit in a car. I'm going to be a bit bold because I'm not in the room with you and I can't see all your faces, but I hope you're all with me and thinking no to those questions. So my question really, my challenge for us today is, do we understand our goal when it comes to being a Christian, to being a follower of Jesus? And what does success look like in that? See, it started like this. I was sitting in a coffee shop a couple of weeks ago doing some work and having Audible, which is like, it reads storybooks to you, it's great. I was listening to a book on discipleship. And there was a quote that caught my attention, and enough so that I had to stop what I was doing there and then and text it to our leadership team. And the quote, it was something like this: "What would our churches look like if the way that we viewed success was not based on how well the leaders of the church do the ministry, but on how well they do the ministry?" Let me read that again. What would our churches look like if the way we viewed success was not based on how well the leaders of the church do the ministry, but on how well those they lead do the ministry? Imagine that. Like, it's really challenging in some sense. Maybe particularly because it puts a lot more emphasis on you. Because when it comes to how we see a particular church, maybe when we're joining a new one, or we're moving, doesn't our thoughts and our choices on which church we we're a part of often depend on the quality of the ministry providing for us. Now, I'm not aiming this as a particular dig at anyone that's joined us. It's for general. But if I asked you the question, what do you love about church? Would we describe our experience of a Sunday morning? If I asked you, picture a thriving church right now in your head, you might imagine something like an elevation worship or a Bethel. You're probably not imagining a church of 12 people underground in China that aren't allowed to meet together because they're persecuted so much. If you were looking for a quality church, you could be tempted by three things, really. You could be tempted by talent, you could be tempted by resources and crowds. Now, for me now, I probably wouldn't want to go near a church that didn't have a good kids work, because I've been spoiled, I love it that my kids get to be part of a ministry, and I get to listen to stuff for a change, But for you, it could be the quality of the preaching on a Sunday, or even a celebrity pastor, or the quality of the worship band. Or equally, we're sometimes drawn to just where there are lots of people going. And that could be related to the previous thing I said. But if I pass like a barber or a cafe with no people in it, I don't go anywhere near it, because people attract people. And I did this test once, right? I went into like an empty coffee shop, and I sat at the front. I got my laptop out. I had my beanie hat on. I looked well trendy. And just 5 minutes in the place, when I was sat at the front by the window, the place was half full. People attract people, and they tend to attract the same type of people as well. But maybe what attracts you is something different. Maybe it's what the building looks like. Are you drawn in by beautiful things? Are you after that magical experience where you're served the best? Hillsong do it the best, in my opinion. Like once me and Leanne, we went to London, and this lady introduced herself at the door, brought us to a place to get us a coffee, then shown us to our seat, and then sat by us and talked to us. But this basically boils down to whether a church has the resources or the money to do these sorts of things. The more finance available for the latest tech, maintenance, staff, the training, the smoother your experience will be. And so often, our idea of a good or successful church is based on the level of finances, talent, or crowds. And not that there's anything wrong with having money, a beautiful venue, a great experience, skilled leaders and lots of people attending. That stuff is an absolute blessing. When we love those experiences, there's nothing wrong with enjoying church, But if our aim as a disciple of Jesus is spiritual maturity, and evidence for that is everyone doing the ministry that God has called them into, then money, talent, and crowds aren't really a marker for successful discipleship in Jesus for your life, are they? In fact, when we look at the Gospels, we see Jesus call people to abandon these things in order to follow him. We see with the crowds in Matthew 13:36, he said, "Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came into him saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the wheats of the field.' Then Jesus left the crowds and drew close to his disciples." Jesus left the crowds and drew close to his disciples. Like, Jesus wasn't about the crowds. He knew they were there to consume and kind of move on to the next teaching and the next teaching. There's a difference between discipleship, being a disciple, being intimate with Jesus, and being one of the crowd. Then relating to resources, to money, in Mark chapter 10 verse 21, we have the parable of the rich young ruler. It says this: "Looking at him, Jesus showed love to him and said to him, 'One thing you lack. Go and sell all your possessions and give to the poor. You will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me.'" Not that there is anything wrong with money, but Jesus, sometimes it can be a hindrance rather than something that draws us closer to Jesus. So we can't really look at, again, a particular type of resource and blessing and say that there's a relation to a closeness of discipleship. And then there's talents. And for this, it really drew me to Jesus watching the disciples' feet. In John 13, verses 13 to 14, it says this: "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." You see, the thing with Jesus is he isn't really trying to showcase his talents. Jesus showcases his humility, not his ability. And every time he's been asked to demonstrate something that's the miraculous or something like that, he refuses, But he acts in the miraculous out of his compassion in his ministry. Not that he can't do it, but he chooses another way. He chooses to show character instead, to prioritize character. So, if we look at what Jesus has asked us to do our markers for success, the talent, the finances, the resources, the crowds, do they tick the boxes? Or do we need to reevaluate what exactly success should look like? On your seat, you should have found a sheet that is a letter that is written from a pastor and Christian philosopher, Dallas Willard. You've probably heard us quote him before. But he voices his reflections on a report which Willow Creek, a massive church in America, produced regarding its ministry. And what he found in this report is what they discovered anyway as a church, was that they did everything really well. They did ministry really well. They did the welcome really well. Everything you could imagine as a church, they did really well. So, like food banks and all of that sort of stuff, they did it brilliantly. But what they failed on was making disciples. They didn't make disciples very well, or they couldn't determine who was a disciple and who wasn't. And here on this letter, this is Dallas Willard. He looks at that church and he looks at basically a model that seems to be emphasized and preferences that seem to be emphasized within the church, the Western church today, which we belong of, and we sometimes fall into the trap of all of these things. And he looks at them and he basically says, this is the reason why you're not making disciples. So I just want to encourage you, have a look at that letter, take that away as homework, and I'll just finish off now. And I just want to say a little bit about our vision as a church, because our vision as a church is to belong, to believe, to become, and there's lots of words in between that Matt knows. But it's a vision about journeying to become mature disciples of Christ who make more disciples. That is our goal of followers of Jesus. And that's because that's the mission that Jesus gave us, nothing else. So, let's just look at the Great Commission. It says this in Matthew 28. Jesus came and told his disciples, "I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28:18-20, that is the mission of the church that was given by Jesus to his disciples before he ascended into heaven. This is our aim, our goal as the church, and the focus, what does it seem to be about? Discipleship. Go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Spirit and the Son, teaching them everything I have commanded you. Now, I'll go into this with a little bit more detail in a couple of weeks' time when I can be with you in person. But what is important to recognize is that this isn't a passive experience. This is what it looks like to drive the car. And as we've been looking over these past couple of weeks, a good marker that we're on the right track is spiritual maturity that produces a good fruit. And as Dallas Willard again describes, becoming like Jesus would be if he were you. Jesus in your culture, your context, your job role, in parenthood, wherever you find yourself, that is the crux of discipleship. You doing the ministry, you doing the driving. That is what success looks like. Simply attending a church with good resources and talent and people doesn't seem to achieve that. It requires each of us to practice the Jesus life, to risk looking foolish, actively participating in serving one another, hospitality in love for one another, and so much more. And the point in everything that we do as leaders of the church is to help you mature so that you can do the ministry of Jesus. And if that isn't happening, and we are just creating a pleasant experience week by week, then we've missed the point somewhere. So my hope and prayer here for you today is to help us try and rethink who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do. So I pray just take away the letter with you to process it, and feel free to send Matt and Joe all your challenging questions and send me any encouragements that you've got. No, you can send me anything. And let's reimagine what a church of 100 drivers for Jesus could do in the city of Worcester. God bless you guys, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.